This is what happened in Chocó. To understand what was lost, you have to understand what was there. Chocó sits on Colombia's Pacific coast, a region unlike almost anywhere else in the country.
Hit subscribe so you don't miss our next story.
At 7:34 in the morning on August 10th, 2026, the ground beneath western Colombia did not just shake, it broke. In seconds, walls that had stood for generations came down. Streets filled with dust, and a region already carrying decades of hardship was forced to survive one of the deadliest earthquakes in its history. Dense rainforest, rivers that serve as roads, towns that can only be reached by boat. It is one of the wettest places on Earth and one of the most biodiverse.
Ay, no, se va a caer la casa.
It is also home to some of Colombia's oldest Afro-Colombian and indigenous communities people, who have lived off this land and its rivers for centuries, often with little support from the state. For decades, Chocó has carried the weight of poverty, isolation, and armed conflict. Roads are scarce, hospitals are few. When disaster strikes here, it does not strike a wealthy suburb with quick access to aid. It strikes communities that were already stretched to their limit. At 12:34 UTC 7:34 in the morning local time, the United States Geological Survey recorded a magnitude 7.4 earthquake. Its epicenter was near the small town of San José del Palmar, deep in Chocó, at a depth of roughly 107 kilometers. A quake this size, this deep, does not stay contained.
Ay, marica. Ay, marica.
The shaking radiated outward for hundreds of kilometers. It was felt strongly in Bogotá, more than 150 miles away. It reached across the border into Ecuador. It reached Panama, where people ran into the streets as their own buildings swayed. The Colombian Geological Service's early readings shifted rapidly, first estimated at 6.6, then revised upward to 7.4 as more data came in. That kind of correction, in the middle of a disaster, tells its own story. This was bigger than anyone initially understood. What followed was devastation on a scale Colombia has not seen in generations. Severe damage was recorded across 16 departments. The hardest hit, Risaralda, Caldas, Valle del Cauca, and Chocó itself, reaching major cities including Pereira, Manizales, Cali, and Quibdó. In Cali, at least 20 structures collapsed across a dozen locations, trapping people beneath the rubble as emergency crews worked to reach them. In Manizales, video captured part of the city's Metropolitan Cathedral Basilica, the tallest cathedral in Colombia, crumbling under the force of the tremor. Across the affected region, more than 45,000 homes were damaged. Over 9,000 were completely destroyed. At least 140 buildings collapsed outright. Schools, health facilities, roads, and bridges were all left in ruins. Critical infrastructure that communities depend on every single day, now gone in an instant. In the first hours, officials confirmed at least 77 deaths. As search and rescue teams pushed further into the wreckage, that number rose, past 100, then past 180. Colombia's president declared a national state of emergency as the scale of the crisis became clear. The earthquake's reach extended well beyond collapsed buildings. Colombia's aviation authority suspended flights to and from multiple cities, including Quibdó, Armenia, Cartago, Buenaventura, Cali, and Rio Negro, near Medellin. Separately, flights in and out of Popayan were halted due to renewed activity at the nearby U.S.C. volcano, a reminder that this is a region shaped by multiple, overlapping natural hazards. Officials confirmed there was no tsunami threat from the quake itself, offering at least one measure of relief along the coast. But on the ground, the disruption to transportation, communication, and daily life stretched across the country for days.
Quietos todos, quietos todos, quietos, quietos, quietos. Quietos todos, quietos todos. Dios mío. Mira, mira ese edificio, mira ese edificio. Dios mío, Señor. Padre Santo. Dios mío, Señor. Padre eterno, Padre Santo, Padrecito lindo. Ayúdenos, ayúdenos, Dios mío, Dios mío. Dios mío, lindo. Dios mío. Que está aquí para abajo enseguida. Cálmate, cálmate, cálmate. Calmados, niños, calmados, por favor. Calmados, calmados. Calmados, bajemos, pero calmados, bajemos de a uno, calmados, calmados. Todo lo que se cayó, mira.
Communication lines went down in some of the hardest hit towns. Local leaders described the situation bluntly. They had no way to properly respond to what had happened. Aid, when it came, had to travel by water into towns that were already difficult to reach on an ordinary day. Disasters do not affect everyone equally. In Chocó, decades of neglect met a single morning of catastrophe, and the result was compounded suffering for people who had already been asked to endure so much.
Dios mío bendito. Dios mío, Dios mío. Dios mío. Padre Santo, Padre Santo. Padre Santo. Padre Santo. Michen los niños. Los niños, Michen los niños.
Llama al colegio. Yo, papi, yo. ¿Ah? Gracias, fuese. ¡Joda! ¡Listo!
In the hours after the quake, Colombia's National Unit for Disaster Risk Management, known as UNGRD, moved to coordinate the emergency response assessing damage, gathering reports from across the affected departments, and organizing search and rescue efforts in the hardest hit zones. The Colombian president convened emergency meetings to direct national resources toward the crisis. Local mayors, from Cali to Manizales to Buenaventura, worked to account for their communities and get help to those trapped or displaced. Days later, as rescue operations continued, the confirmed death toll climbed past 280. More than 3,900 people were reported injured. Over 4,000 remained missing. Families still waiting, still searching, still hoping. This became the deadliest earthquake to strike Colombia in this century. Behind every one of these numbers is a name, a home, a family, standing in what used to be their street, looking for someone who has not come home. International humanitarian organizations moved quickly as well. Groups already operating in Colombia with experience drawn from past earthquake responses in the region, including neighboring Venezuela. began coordinating direct support and partnerships with local organizations, focused especially on Chocó and Valle del Cauca, where needs were greatest and access was hardest. Community members themselves became first responders in many towns, clearing fallen debris by hand, searching for neighbors, and beginning the long process of recovery long before formal aid could arrive. It is slow, difficult work, but it is happening. The earthquake that struck Chocó on August 10, 2026, lasted only seconds. Its consequences will last for years. Homes will be rebuilt, roads will be repaired. But for the families who lost someone, and for a region that was already fighting to be seen and supported, recovery means more than clearing rubble. It means finally getting the investment, the infrastructure, and the attention that should have been there long before disaster struck. Colombia has faced earthquakes, floods, and landslides before. Each time the story is the same. It is the poorest and most isolated communities that suffer the most and take the longest to recover. As search and rescue efforts continue, and as the true scale of this disaster becomes fully known, one thing is already certain: the people of Chocó did not choose this, but they will be the ones left to rebuild.